Welcome to tonight's masterclass. My name is Robin Young. I'm the publisher of Orthopedics This Week, and it is my pleasure to be your moderator this evening. Tonight, we're going to talk about spinal navigation, but not the hardware-based navigation you may have known for the past 30 years or so, not the one with cameras, markers, references, and so forth, and typically a CT or equivalent system sitting in the OR. Our featured company this evening, VUZE Medical, who, by the way, won our Best Technology in Spine Award last year, has figured out how to avoid all those systems when guiding spine surgery. It does the entire task with software. It harnesses the power of modern computer graphics used typically in gaming for running its algorithms. All that's needed in the OR to put the VUZE navigation system to work is a 2D C-arm and a PC. It's the smallest footprint in the OR I've seen yet for a navigation system. Now, the VUZE system has been used with 40 patients, more than 40 patients so far, and the early clinical data is impressive enough, as I said earlier, to win the Best Technology in Spine Award last year. It is FDA cleared, and the company is now actively recruiting one or two or even three sites in the US to use the system pre-commercially. With us is David Tokalski, who's the founder and CEO of Israeli-based VUZE Medical. David has been in navigation for nearly 30 years. Prior to founding VUZE in 2017, he led as CEO two other medical startups that became standards of care in their respective fields. Super Dimension, now part of Medtronic, was a pioneer in electromagnetically navigated bronchoscopy. After that, David founded Sync RS, now part of Philips, whose product Sync Vision is installed at nearly half the coronary cath labs in the world. David is also inventor or co-inventor of over 50 patents related to guided medical interventions. He will explain the VUZE system and how it came to life, and that'll be followed by a cadaveric demonstration by Dr. Gerion Schiffer, and then that will be followed by a description of the first in-human trial by its principal investigator, Dr. Ori Keenan. So first, David, if you could you talk us a little bit about how the system got started and its origins?
Well, thank you, Robin, for this very kind introduction. And yes, I'll start by explaining what the system does. We are providing software-based guidance and verification with a current focus on spine surgery, though I would note that there is nothing spine-specific or anatomy-specific about our technology, and we do foresee broader applicability to other skeletal portions and interventions down the road. And what we're doing is providing a solution where all you need in the OR, as you mentioned, is just a standard C-arm, a 2D C-arm, and an off-the-shelf PC running our software. In principle, what VUZE does is as follows. VUZE detects the surgical tools in the intra-op 2D X-rays. It co-registered the 2D intra-op into the prior 3D, which may come from a pre-op CT in our Gen 1 FDA-cleared version, or in Gen 2, which is currently pending FDA clearance, also from an in-OR pre-op 3D, CT, or CBCT. After it performs that co-registration, it virtually places the surgical tools from the X-rays onto their position in the 3D of the same vertebra. It slices that 3D along the longitudinal axis of the tool, both axially and sagittally, and it displays the traditional navigational views. But it does that only with software. There are no cameras, no markers, no references, no calibrations, no tool modifications, as we mentioned before, only a 2D C-arm and a PC. You know, the other day, I was hearing a couple of the X-ray technicians in our clinical trial describing the VUZE system to one another, and one of them said, this is unbelievable. It's like getting a new CT scan each time you acquire a new X-ray. So of course, that is not part of our FDA indications, but that's how some of our users see us. Two additional points that I should mention explicitly. One is that we require only AP X-rays. We have no need for lateral views, and that is an outcome of one of the early requirements by the early potential users we had interviewed, who said, yeah, we like the X-ray workflow, but please avoid lateral views because it complicates the workflow, sterility issues, et cetera, et cetera. The other important point is that our Gen 1 supports a limited selection of 2D C-arms, whereas our Gen 2 that is currently pending FDA clearance supports a very broad range of 2D and 3D C-arms from all major manufacturers. So having described the principle of operation, would it be okay if I move on to describing the workflow a little bit?
Yes, please do. Thank you.
Okay, so we start with planning, pre-op planning that takes only a couple of minutes, performed on a DICOM-like viewers, can be, as you see in the images here, on a standalone laptop, or could be on the VUZE system in the OR. Our first gen, the FDA-cleared generation, had a time lag for data processing in between planning and procedure. Our second generation has no such data processing, so that planning, as I said, can be done also in the OR right before surgery and within seconds start surgery itself. So in the planning phase, we determine the insertion lines from skin level through vertebral entry point to the target point with automatic measurements, implant sizing, et cetera, et cetera. That planning is now married, so to speak, to the 3D data and transferred to our procedure software. So here we are now in the OR, and we start by determining the incision site. In minimally invasive surgery, it's of course very important for a good number of reasons to make the incision as small as possible. So we acquire one X-ray, typically from 0,0. We see the prior planning of the two vertebrae overlaid on that X-ray, accounting for the current angle of the C-arm, and we see how our scalpel relates to the planned entry site, incision site, that's a signed circle, and then we can adjust the position of the scalpel accordingly, again, to make the incision as small as possible. Now we moved on to insertion. We insert a Jamshidi, acquire a first generally AP view. On the upper left corner, we see what we call the planning view, the roadmap, which is how we planned the 4 tool insertions previously on the 3D data. So going back to that first X-ray view, generally AP, we see the tool detection in yellow. That's a risk mitigation measure, the dotted yellow line. And then we see the planning overlaid on that X-ray from the current viewing angle of the C-arm. That's the sign line, entry point, vertebral entry point, target. So if that first 2D image looks okay in 2 dimensions, then we acquire a second X-ray that need be at least 10 degrees apart. So it's still generally AP, it needs to be at least 10 degrees apart. And if that looks acceptable as well, we generate the cross sections, and here we are with the axial and sagittal traditional navigational views. The solid yellow line is where the tool currently is. The 5mm notches is how far we still need to go. From this point, some surgeons do it all at once. Some of them take another X-ray in between. It's important to note that for now determining the advancement of the tool along the already determined trajectory, we only need one generally AP X-ray at a time, and it can be from one of the prior 2 angles or from a different generally AP angle. So we advance the tool, do the exchange to the wire, acquire another X-ray, one X-ray, and here we are. We're at the target. So that, Robin, is the workflow of the system. I should probably also note that making that happen was our entire team, some of whose members have been with me in the prior endeavors you had mentioned, and we're bringing with them into the current endeavor very considerable applicable expertise.
And really, it's the quality of those images that just stands out. That's the immediate reaction I get as I see you walk through this. And really, as you have always done with your other companies, truly outstanding work. No wonder you were the best
Thank you.
technology in spine last year.
Thank
If
you.
you would take a minute or two and describe where the idea for the VUZE system came from and how you brought it to life. What made you start this
Sure.
interesting journey?
So why are we doing this? In short, because we have concluded 7, 8, 9 years ago that perhaps the largest portion of the market is overwhelmingly underserved. And I shall describe how that happened. Back late 2015, I guess, I was approached by a very nice guy by the name of Nissan Elimelech, the founder of Augmetics. He was planning on doing augmented reality for spine surgery, and he was asking for my help. I didn't know anything about spine surgery, but it sounded like fun, so I said, sure. So started looking at spine surgery, and one thing immediately stood out. My naive assumption was that by then, the legacy navigation systems, the stereotactic frameless navigation systems, whom I've known back in the 1990s, are standard of care. I mean, it's been over 20 years since FDA clearance. But what I
Crazy.
actually discovered, I guess to our viewers, that is a well-known fact, is that the hardware-intensive navigation, by now, by the way, cleared for 29 years, since 1995, I believe, is
Yep.
still used primarily for large inpatient surgeries. And that has to do with some issues such as cost, complexity, tool specificity, footprint, et cetera, whereas the remainder of the market, um, so at least 80% of short segment fixations remain
Mhm.
X-ray guided, 100%
That's
of
right.
augmentations.
Mhm.
That is despite the fact that the market desires to go from inpatient to outpatient, from outpatient to ambulatory. It must be MIS, your reliance on X-ray increases. So being a marketing person, I said to myself, that is really bizarre. If that is how the market is structured, and if navigation has been approved for 20-something years and still used for a small minority of surgeries, then the market is telling us something.
Mhm.
And my next mission was to find out what the market is telling us.
So, as you look at the system you've developed, and of course, you've now had your first in man cases, and we're going to hear more about that later. How do you envision this system being used as perhaps a replacement to some of the existing systems you were just describing? And you're 100% right, by the way, that the systems, which did start back and was brilliant in the early 1990s, has been surprisingly is still kind of the basic system out there. So, how do you see this being used?
Right. So when we started interviewing surgeons, and that is probably 2016, what surgeons were telling us was basically, we like the X-ray guided workflow. It's familiar, it's simple, it's affordable, it's tool neutral, very small footprint in the OR, et cetera, et cetera. What we're missing is those cross-sectional navigational views, the axial and sagittal views. We need those for greater assurance because the assurance just from AP and lateral x-rays, which we wish to avoid, and from our tactile feeling is incomplete. So the conclusion from that was that if we stick to the x-ray guided workflow, avoid laterals if possible, and provides the cross-sectional views, then that would be a winner. And that's what VUZE actually is. So our first generation has been cleared since 2022 for minimally invasive stabilizations, fixations coupled with fusions, augmentations in S1 through T7. Gen 2 that I mentioned before is currently under FDA review. Our clinical experience to date is over 40 patients. We'll hear Dr. Kinan talking about it later. And what we are seeking now, as you mentioned, Robin, is pre-commercial US sites for our VUZE system, which by the way looks like this. What you're seeing this is just a cart with a large touchscreen, and in that box, there are a PC, an off-the-shelf PC, and an isolation transformer. That's all it is. So that is a VUZE system. One more point per your question, we are not aiming to replace the legacy navigation for the large inpatient interventions. Those systems are very proven technology. They have many additional features that we do not have. What we're aiming is to complement those by adding to the current X-ray guided workflow some features that would maintain the simplicity, affordability, and tool neutrality, as you can see in this 2x2 matrix here, and provide greater assurance by very much increasing the accuracy and the consistency. That is our aim.
Well, let me highlight one word you used, affordability. And that is essential, obviously, to the outpatient and the ASC market. I know my readers and our audience here are going to, a natural question is, how's the accuracy of the system?
Well, thank you for asking that. So accuracy is indeed important. Here is an FDA safety communication about stereotactic frameless navigation, the navigation systems that we're all familiar with from the 1990s. And that safety communication is from 2017, so 7 years ago. And in that communication, FDA enumerates some of the potential reasons for very specific cases where accuracy might be questioned. And those have to do with the abundance of hardware, with the complexity of the system, with the need for compatible instruments and accessories, with the anatomical complexity, potential segment shifts, prone, supine, or as we know, shifts that may occur during surgery because of the force exercised upon the spine, and of reference shifts that may cause a registration error. Now, to be very clear, I'm not questioning the value of those systems. Those are proven technologies that have been with us for 30 years. And as I said, we're aiming to complement them. I would like to note that in those situations, the short segment X-ray guided interventions that we're aiming to address and provide a solution for, when you look at our own system, we have no navigational hardware, no accessories, no tool modifications whatsoever. The tool neutrality is, by the way, is configurable by software, and the system currently is completely tool neutral. No registration fiducials. There's no setup beyond just connecting our cart that we saw before to the video output of the C-arm. There is no issue of a segment shift because our focus is on the treated vertebra. So
Yeah.
we do not mind the whole prone supine issue, which is a challenge in registration and navigation for
That's right.
legacy systems in the case of pre-op CT. And we have no issue of reference shifts simply because we have no references. Also, we don't mind the tool bending, which also occurs sometimes because
Yeah. Yeah.
unlike the legacy systems that track the proximal end of the tool and extrapolate where the distal tip is, we track through the X-rays directly the distal tip. So again, I'm not for a moment questioning the accuracy and the value of the legacy systems. We're not claiming for greater accuracy. We'll hear our users later describing their own impressions about accuracy and just noting those differences. To be fair, there is another difference, which at first we're concerned with, is that what we show is stepwise. Our display is updated every time a new AP X-ray is acquired, unlike the legacy navigation systems that have the cameras and auto markers and the reference, et cetera, and by doing so, provide a continuous display. So ours is real-time, but stepwise. And at first, we were concerned whether that might be an issue, but we discovered that it is not, because when we address surgeons who are daily performing the X-ray guided workflow, they are used to moving the tool, acquiring an X-ray, looking, changing trajectory, acquiring an X-ray, looking. So we found out that, in fact, our workflow very much fits in the current X-ray guided workflow with a nice avoidance or elimination of the lateral views. One last thing I should mention, you asked about accuracy, but it's maybe perhaps also talk a bit about performance.
Sure,
Uh,
please.
so we are clearly the beneficiaries of the progress in graphic processing hardware that has occurred over the past few years, primarily for the gaming industry, right? It wasn't for the medical industry, it was primarily for the gaming industry. But we are the beneficiaries of that.
Mhm. Well,
So
so I have to ask you, so do you have NVIDIA chips in your system?
yeah, I'm not advertising NVIDIA here, but yes, we do.
But,
So just to give
but
you an
that's,
idea, uh, using the progress we have made from concept to product in our own algorithms, as well as the progress on the hardware that you had mentioned, our processing time for each new incoming AP X-ray in 2017 in our first prototype was, you're sitting still, was 1 hour, and today it's 2.5 seconds. So there has been a considerable improvement
so
over the years.
let me reiterate a very key point you mentioned earlier. You are looking for 2 or 3 sites in the United States that can uh, bring the system into their operating room and be kind of your reference sites here in the U.S. Is that right?
That is absolutely right. We're looking for
Okay.
sites where we can generate some feedback, hopefully with surgeons who would also be happy to talk about their experience
Mhm.
once they gain it.
Honestly, David, I was so impressed when I first heard about this more than a year ago. Every time I hear you describe it, I get excited again. Everything you're doing, in my
So do
opinion,
I,
is
by the
just so
way.
smart. Huh? Yes,
So
no,
so do
and
I.
and you're exactly right. As an adjunct to the existing systems, this is perfect. It's more affordable. It brings all this new power in, all of these new characteristics, these new capabilities.
Right. So
I really think spine and neurosurgeons are going to be just so excited by this. Go ahead, David.
I can tell you from our early experience in the numerous cadaveric workshops and then with over 40 patients by now, when you introduce surgeons to our system and they see 2 X-rays and then cross sections, this is like to them like magic. The common expressions are game changer, magic,
Oh,
etc.
yeah,
So
yeah,
so
but you got to
apparently
use,
that is a
but you,
considerable step.
but to our audience, you have to try this. You need to get your hands on this thing and take it for a test drive. So, David, I know we've got Dr. Keenan sitting patiently waiting for us. I'll let you have the final word, and then we want to move on to Dr. Ori Keenan, who is head of spine surgery at a 1,200 bed medical center and has used your system. So, David, any final comments?
Well, yeah, well, thank you. Actually, I think what we would do best is first observe the cadaveric demonstration by Dr. Schiffer
Sorry.
and then move
Yes.
on to Dr. Kainan. And let's just please allow a
Perfect.
few seconds for our audience to read the current indications for use in the US as cleared by FDA.
Yes. Okay. Wonderful. All right. Hope you're reading fast, everybody. And by the way, we are recording this, and it will be available afterwards for review and rewatch by everyone. Okay, let's move on then to the cadaveric demonstration. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Robin.
Hello, everybody. Also from my side, a hearty welcome and thanks for your time you give to us to demonstrate the system. My name is Georg Schiffer. As David says, I'm a surgeon from Germany, Cologne, quite in the center. Maybe someone has been there. And I'm following these guys with this system since 2019. And to my history briefly, I worked for 15 years at the University Hospital of Cologne, so I'm an orthopedic surgeon with a focus on trauma and especially on spine trauma during these years. And I did a lot of navigation with a marker-based navigation system, a few thousand screws I placed with that. And I think we had it well established in Cologne. And when I changed to a smaller hospital, some kilometers off Cologne, of course, I had the wish to continue with navigation because I'm a real fan of accuracy and precision, and I wanted to continue. But I saw that there are two main obstacles. If you don't have this high number of cases, it's quite difficult and crucial to establish a current workflow in the OR with the scrub nurses, with the technicians, to have everything set up well, because that's a lot of equipment which goes into the OR. And on the other hand, it's the costs. So if you don't have a high number of cases, it's difficult to argument for the costs of a navigation system. So when I get in contact with these guys from Israel, I was surprised how they are able to do this with very small means, and I would focus on that to demonstrate to you what are step-by-step the single steps of placing K-wires for pedicle instrumentation, and how easy it was and how are the advantages of the system. So, if we have a look at the setup, we have a patient, we have a C-arm, and the system works with C-arms of Siemens, Siemens, GE, or Philips, so it doesn't matter. Now we have a 3D C-arm here because we want to prove afterwards, after placing the K-wires, that the virtuality represented by the system reflects the reality, so that we will do a spin afterwards to prove that it's really correct. But in fact, the system does not need a 3D C-arm for working. Also, a 2D 3-arm is able to catch it. So, and then we have the VUZE system over there. They were told normally it's a card. Now we have a touch screen. Giraffe is standing there, and a laptop. And we have a video cable. That's all we have. We had no other things in the OR. So that's quite close to your regular setup in the OR. So now when we start, before we did that in the preparation, we did a CT scan of the cadaver, and we put the CT scan into the VUZE system, and we did the planning as David showed. But we don't want to bore you, because it's regular planning where you put your screws in. And we will start with L3, quite an easy level, I know, but maybe it's easier to show you how the system generally works. Giraffe has the control over the screen, and if you look at the screen, maybe we can have it on the great panel, the view screen, yeah? You see in the upper left part the roadmap. And you see that there is a virtual image of the spine, and you have the 4 screws. We planned screws for L3 and L4, and now we start with L3 on the right side, because you see that it's the blue marking. And now we start the procedure, which means Giraffe Revive will take first X-ray AP in the, I call it 0-0 position, with no tilting of the C-arm in any direction, because it makes you easier to correct the EMG needle. I will show you later. But please, the first X-ray. Now this X-ray is transferred from the C-arm to the system. It's calculating, and to my opinion, this first part is very interesting. We should take a little time to explain it to you. You see on the screen the X-ray produced by the C-arm, and the system is able to detect where is L3 and L4. We will show you later that it can also help you by level identification. That means if we would take an X-ray from somewhere else, the system won't accept that. It would say there's no L3 and L4 nearby. That means it shows you where is L3 and L4, and as we think we start with L3 on the right side, this is blue marked. And so you have the blue line, that means that it's a trajectory you have planned. You have the dotted circle, that is your incision site, and you have the red point, that is the bone entry, which is crucial for placing the Yamshidi needle. So the first step, I take my scalpel and I put it somewhere where I believe maybe the entrance point could be, and we take a new X-ray. Of course, we could do it at first, but I just want to demonstrate it to you. So please, a new X-ray. You see the scalpel, and you see that I'm not so far away. But as you know, if you're doing pedicle screws minimal invasive, the correct skin incision is very important, because if you do it too far medially, you have problems to get the correct trajectory. So that means I have to correct my incision site. I move it a little bit upward and a little bit to the side. And if I have the C-arm in the 0-0 position, it's very easy to correct that. So please, a new X-ray. And you see, as David mentioned, I don't produce a Ferguson view. It doesn't matter if the cadaver is tilted or if it's not perfectly aligned. It doesn't matter. I see that the incision site is correct. Okay? So I do the incision there. And I take my Yamashita. Doesn't bleed? Okay. So the second information I have, can you once again go to the incision site menu? You see, you get a rough idea in which direction you have to put in the Yamashita needle, as you see the blue line. It has to go a little bit upward and a little bit center to the medium. So I get my bony contact, and I just press it in a little bit. Okay. So now we take the new X-ray. Okay, so again, you see the blue line. That is my intended trajectory. And you see the tool, the Yamashita needle, and it's quite near to it. So the next point I go for is the bone entrance point, as normal. So I see I'm a little bit lateral of the intended entrance point. From my experience, that normally is no problem. I can correct that by converging the needle afterwards. It's a problem if you're too far medial, because you cannot go any further. I can decide if I correct it or not at that moment, as it is not important to produce here a perfect screw, but just to demonstrate you what the system is able to do. I would accept it like that. And now the system needs a second angle, also AP, but a second angle for triangulation to produce cross sections. And you see the system gives a recommendation. You see it in the blue letters, RAO -9 and cranially -20. This is a rough orientation. You don't need to produce that with your CM correctly. You can also take -5 and -15. In fact, any different angle would do it. So now position the C-arm in the new position, and we take a new X-ray. And on the view screen, you see now you have these two X-rays, and you see also the second plane, the second image, and you see also there the trajectory. Now in the green rectangle image is also, the trajectory is fine, and I'm a little bit lateral from the intended entrance point. If I'm not happy with the entrance point, I go back and correct it. But now I would think I will be able to place the pedicle screw like that, so I can decide to generate cross sections. Okay, now you get the information from the CT scan before, that are of course the images of the CT which we have done before, and you see your position. You can say, oh, I'm quite a little bit lateral, so it will be difficult to hit the pedicle. So I can decide to accept it, or I can go back. Okay. In this case, in the sagittal view, you see that the height and the orientation is fine. I will convert it more and advance it. Okay. So now as we change the trajectory of the needle, the system needs two new images to do cross sections again. So first image, please. Okay, and now we again have a recommendation, LAO 10 degrees and quarterly 20 degrees. Revise operating the C-arm. But you see, to no time there's a need for a lateral image, which is quite good for our healthy. And on the other hand, it's easier concerning sterile purposes. So again, we have the second image, and we generate cross sections again. And we see that the needle is quite at the lateral cortex of the pedicle. On the sagittal view, it's quite good. It's in the center. So we can again decide if we leave it like that. As I said, it's not important to produce a perfect screw. We will later on compare what the system told us and what the reality is. So I will decide to accept that. And I will again try to convert it a little bit more. Okay. And we again to two new images. You see, you receive X-rays you wouldn't accept in normal life if you're doing it without navigation. Probably most of us would produce Ferguson views and orientate on them. Second image. And again, generate the cross sections. And I see I succeeded in correcting the trajectory so that I go through the pedicle. Now, when I'm now happy with this trajectory, I can press the accept button over there. It's in the upper right corner. That means the system knows that I'm happy with the trajectory and it's just dealing with the length or the depth. That means I won't change the trajectory anymore, and I would advance the needle. So now we only need one new image to update the length. So please, a new image. Okay. If you see that the yellow bar has lengthened, that's the tip of my tool. If I unintentionally change the trajectory, of course, this is not precise enough, but the system will recognize that and tell you, you changed the trajectory. Maybe the Jamshidi is deflected by the bony walls of the spinal channel, and it changes and moves, and then the system tells you it's not working anymore. So if I'm happy with that, I can exchange it to a K-wire. Just hammer it in a little bit. And as the trajectory has not been changed now, I again need one more image to update the depths of the instrument. You know, that's the hardest part, to get out the Jamshidi without getting out the K-wire. Okay. So the system it doesn't matter if you use the Jamshidi, no matter which thickness, which length, or if you use a K-wire. But now we do the new X-ray. Okay, we will keep that image. We will show it later. Okay, so we go to the other side. And we again start in the 0, 0 position. And you have selected L3 on the left side. I just placed my scalpel. And we do a new first X-ray. Okay, you see the entrance point must be a little bit higher and a little bit more medially. I place it here. Okay, once more. Okay, so that should be fine for insertion. Okay, you show me again Can you show me again the VUZE monitor? Oh, okay, thank you. So again, you see at the blue line, it has to be put in quite straight. That's not so much convergence, a little bit upward. So I test here, see where I feel the bone, and press it in. Okay. So we do a new first X-ray. Okay, so you see I quite hit the correct bone entrance point, and that's the most important thing. The trajectory can be corrected later. So we take the second image. I'm not too medial, so for me that should be fine and should be able to place the Jamshidi correctly. Okay. So again, also in the second angle, you see now in the green rectangled image, the entrance point is fine, so I can generate cross sections as I don't want to correct the entrance point again. So I would say we can be happy with that. We are quite in the middle of the pedicle. So I advance it. quite hard bone. And I see it's also automatically tilting a little bit, so we take a new first image. Okay, has been advanced. Okay, so I advance it further. Okay. In fact, the angles which you do the X-ray is not so important. You can roughly take any. There are just two needs. First need is they have to be different. You cannot move it by 2 degrees and take a new image, so the system gets no real new information. And what is problematic is the bullseye view. If the instrument, the tool, has no length, the system cannot calculate the depths. Yeah? So that means it should be hit from the side. Okay, so I exchange to the K-wire. I feel the frontal cortex. And extract the Jamshidi. Okay, and we again will do 2 X-rays for verification that I not unintentionally change the trajectory. I won't correct the K-wire at that moment, even if the system says that it's beyond the frontal cortex. The patient won't complain in this case, and we will see how we can demonstrate it on the spin afterwards. Generate cross sections again. I see, I'm at the frontal cortex. So that is the image we will compare later on. So that's the moment where we can do the spin. So the spin has been done, and we are able to compare the visualization of the VUZE system with the reality through the 3D spin. Okay, so on the upper left part you see the 3D spin, the result, and that is the L3 left screw. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, left. And you see the visualization, which means that was the K-wire I placed second. And if you look at the axial views in the visualization, it's completely, the K-wire is in the center of the pedicle, and I think it's the same on the lower left image on the C-arm. And you see it ends at the frontal cortex. Also, I think there's a complete symmetry and a complete similar distribution. In the sagittal view, you see that the trajectory goes a little bit downward, facing towards the ground plate. And I think if you compare the utmost right image and the image on the C-arm on the upper right corner, I think you will agree that it is a perfect match. Okay? And that is the K-wire which came a little bit from the lateral position. You see it on the screen. So again, on the left side, the C-arm, on the right side, the VUZE system. And if you compare the axial views, you see that the K-wire is coming from far lateral, but I was able to hit the pedicle again, and it goes to the opposite side, to the frontal cortex. And in the sagittal view, it's quite horizontally and parallel to the ground plate, and I think you would agree that also it is the same in virtuality and reality. And that was our experience during the last 3 years when we did around 20 cadavers with instrumentations from S1 to T7, and then the last time, as knowing that there's no FDA approval, why we also did the cervical spine, because that's the most common question of surgeons. Why do you stop at T7? Though that was the first approach, but of course we find out that the system does not care if it's thoracic or lumbar spine, and it also works on the cervical spine. But it has not been FDA approved till now. But you see that we saw that in all these cases we had a very, very high accuracy in the comparison between the visualization of the VUZE system and the reality reflected by the spin.
Okay, very interesting cadaveric lab. I was taking notes, by the way, while we were going through that. And I have to say, what strikes me is how, again, as David mentioned earlier, how accurate the system is. And I would just point out before we move on to Dr. Kanan that the system, as you can tell, is really suited to where market trends are going. That is into the outpatient and ASC setting. The simplicity, the accuracy, the ease of use, the way it fits into the workflow. It's really a system for the times. And again, as an adjunct to existing systems as well. Well, it's our pleasure this evening to have with us Dr. Ori Kanan, head of spine surgery at the Rambam Healthcare Campus, a 1,200 bed medical center in northern Israel. Dr. Kanan, it is a real pleasure to have you with us. And thank you for participating in this masterclass. To get us started, can you take 2 or 3 minutes and describe your practice a little bit, the type of hospital you practice in and the types of patients that you treat?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you. Our medical center is a tertiary trauma center. It's the biggest medical center in all of northern Israel. Its a catchment area is about 2 million people, and it's the third largest hospital in Israel. What we do is we do a very large volume of trauma and tumors. Those are the two big things that we do a lot, as well as the basic bread and butter degen everybody else is doing. So this is the main focus in our center.
Wonderful. That's excellent. And before, and you've had some experience with the VUZE system, but prior to VUZE, had you worked with other navigation systems?
Yes, we've been working with navigation for years.
And just to help, just to sort of set the stage for your discussions about the VUZE system, why do you use a navigation system at all? How do you, when you employ one, what does it give you as a surgeon?
Well, it gives us a headache. It also gives us better accuracy. That's the reason we use it. And sometimes we do contemplate whether it's worth it. If it's a one-level fusion, we've done thousands of them. You say, do we really need it? Because it's a big hassle to set it all up. Yep. And so it's sometimes tag of war whether it's worth the hassle or not. But we do use it most of the time for a lot of procedures. I have to say that for percutaneous procedures like kyphoplasty or MIS. Percutaneous screw insertion, a lot of time we just use plate floor. We don't use the navigation for that because it's time consuming basically, and we trust our hands that we do it.
So just parenthetically, I was on Wall Street. I was a Wall Street sell-side analyst for many, many years. And back in the 1990s, I was the analyst that first wrote Updation, described what it did. And from that time in the 1990s to essentially until the VUZE system came on board, the number one complaint I heard is the one you just mentioned. And the reason VUZE won the award last year is because it really tackled the issue of the fiddle factor without without the quality being affected. But I understand, Dr. Keenan, that you did conduct a clinical trial using the VUZE system. And can you describe a little bit about the trial design? And I think you have some slides you want to share with our audience, and maybe you can talk about what you learned from your study as well.
Yes, well, we did the first in human trial. Naturally, a first in human trial, we want to test the safety of a system. Any system that you do first in human, you want to make sure it's safe. And we also want to see the performance and the user compatibility of the system. So the trial was scheduled to include 20 patients. It was completed quite a few months ago, and since then we've added quite a few more. I think we're up to 42, 45 patients using the system. So we've had quite a few cases to gain experience and understand how the system works and how to work with the system. So in terms of the numbers, you see here the gender, age, and BMI distribution of our patients, the 20 patients in the study, and the 22, I think it's more by now, patients we've used since the study. And it's pretty uniform, I think, distribution, both in terms of ages and in terms of BMIs. And since now, David has talked about how we use the system, I'm just going to give you a few examples and show you what we see as surgeons in the OR when we use the system. So the first example is a 39-year-old male with degen spine disease. He was scheduled to have an L3-4 TLIF. And we used our system with the VUZE system. So every surgery starts with first of all, the system, as you see here, showing us the incision site based on what we planned preoperatively. We make our incision, we put in our Yamashita needle. Now, one thing to keep in mind with the system, which is very nice compared to regular fluoro, it's all done in the AP plane. Okay, we do you just take one AP shot, then the system grabs the image, does its magic, and then it shows us what it would look like in 3D. If we're up here, it would show us, okay, the way you're going, you're going to end up here. And once it's in, it shows us how far we're in and how far we want to go in terms of the planning. And this is just based on AP images. And once we were happy for the study, once we were happy with what the system showed us, without any more fluoro, this is just looking at the system, the VUZE system on the computer screen, just like a navigation, but without the navigation. We did a 3D spin to make sure, because this is a safety study. And what we saw, just like in this case, is that exactly where the system showed us we're supposed to be, that's where we were with the 3D scan. And again, we left the guides in, we put in the screws, and then we took another spin. And again, it showed us the exact location of where we're supposed to be as the system projected. Now, this is what it looked like on the one side. And the other side, as you can see up here, it shows us which screw. We have to tell the system which screw you're working on. And from there, it just shows you where to go. And if you're not in the right direction, we'll correct you. You have to redo it. But again, all the corrections are just done on the AP plane, which is really cool. You don't have to go back and forth between the AP and the lateral. It's very comfortable for us. And again, you don't use any special tool, just a regular workflow using your regular tools. Nothing added, just another computer screen standing there and doing some sort of magic to show us the picture we would normally get with navigation. Another example would be this 62-year-old male, which we did a bipedicular kyphoplasty on. Again, same workflow. We see the projected trajectory. You see how far the guide wire is in and how far it still has to go. We see it in both axial and sagittal planes. Once we're happy, we put it in. We do the scan, and we see that we're exactly where it was projected to go. And time again, same thing. Plan and final 3D scan until we were convinced the system is very precise. So basically, if I sum up our experience with the system, we learned that it's very accurate. The projection of the trajectory was always right on with the actual 3D images. Nowadays, once we finish the study and we're convinced the system is accurate, we don't need to do the 3D scans. So it's even faster now. Other things we've learned is that the learning curve is very short. For people who used to work with fluoroscopy, you don't even have to be very very comfortable with navigation. It's very simple to use. And I think, you can't underestimate the usefulness of the fact that it's all done in just the one plane, no need to move the fluoro, and you get the 3D images that you want to get. Now, another thing we learned along the way is that there are a couple of modes of using the system. Some of us use it all along the way, every millimeter of advancement of the guide wire, watch it on the VUZE screen just to make sure everything is okay. Some of us are less patient than that. We just use it to get the incision site, to put the guide wire in, just see we're inside the pedicle, just go the rest of the way, including insertion of the screw, and then just do a scan with the system, not a real 3D scan, just a simulated scan to see that everything is okay. So you can use it in any sort of mode you're comfortable with. It doesn't have to be, very religious use of the system as it's intended to use, and it works in several modes. So for us, this is a very big addition to the layers of safety that we need when we're doing percutaneous procedures. For us, it's a very big game changer. Once we get used to it, we're always asking David, can we use it for this? Can we use it for this? And now it's just, it's available for what it is, and which is for percutaneous thoracolumbar. but it's useful basically for anything. As soon as they allow us to use it, we'll use it for other stuff as well.
Well, I have to say, by the way, David is someone who I have learned sweats the details. But and I have to also compliment you on your imaging, that those the slides that you're showing are outstanding, and it really illustrates real clearly exactly what you're saying. Now, I think you had said that it fit into the workflow well. Could you provide perhaps a little more detail on how the VUZE system would compare with the other navigation systems you've had experience with in your practice?
So really, there's not. It's very different from the usual workflow. The usual workflow for navigation, and we still use regular navigation as well, is you take the arm, you scan the patient, you put the antenna in, then you have to calibrate the camera, see that the camera sees your tools in every different angle. There's always a problem with that. And once you do the scan, you have to go out of the room, let the system scan it, then you can work. And after that, it's pretty straightforward. Okay, but there's a lot of preparation for that. And once you're done, you sometimes need to scan again just to make sure that everything is okay. And to get the same usability that you would with this system, you have to take a lot of extra steps with regular navigation. And this system basically saves you all those extra steps.
A lot fewer steps, right?
Yeah.
A lot fewer steps.
Yep.
So this study was a safety study, and it was, I think, really interesting that you not only took the pictures of how the VUZE system performed, but you compared that against more sophisticated imaging. And I think that's awfully important. And now that you've used it in more than 40 patients, the accuracy, can you talk about how the accuracy is of the VUZE system, again, compared to what you used before VUZE?
Well, I think, first of all, it's important to say that the accuracy of the estimated projectile and position of the tool, for us, it was as close to perfect as you can imagine. It was exactly the same. Now, I think regular navigation does that too. I don't think regular navigation is less accurate. Okay, I wouldn't say that, but I think the system, like I said, after we did 20 patients and we were convinced that every tool was perfectly positioned. We don't do the 3D spin after we put it. We're convinced that we know where it is, and we have no doubt in the system. So I think in terms of precision, we're convinced, all of us, that it's the precision is very high.
Well, that's important. If a surgeon's going to rely on a system, going to trust a system, it's important to know that every single time it's exactly accurate. A lot of the legacy systems force surgeons to adapt to the system. It seems to me VUZE has this really nice system that adapts to you to a certain extent. It fits better into the kind of flow that you as a surgeon are accustomed to, no matter who you are. I know our audience is probably really anxious to ask some questions, so I'm going to remind everybody, you've got that Q&A button down there on your screen. This is one of our best master classes, as you know, and I'm a big fan of the VUZE system, particularly after it won the Spine Award last year. And by the way, that award is given by some of the top key opinion leaders, surgeons, practicing surgeons in spine and neurosurgery. So ask your questions, use the Q&A button. So Dr. Kanan, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We do have a few questions from the audience. David, I've mentioned a couple times that you are looking for U.S. sites in the United States for your system. What kind of sites would you like?
Yes, so we envision those being pre-commercial sites, not in the form of a clinical trial, but rather after we get the anticipated FDA clearance for a second generation. Sites that have a considerable volume of minimally invasive stabilizations, fixation coupled with fusions, augmentations, and where the surgeons would be happy afterwards to also talk about their experiences.
So you want loquacious surgeons. Okay. So what are the limitations? We heard a couple of doctors talk about the Jamshidi. What are the limitations in terms of the Jamshidi K-wire vendors? Are there any, and any physical characteristics?
None really, no limitations. We are tool neutral. Currently, the system is being VUZed to detect elongated straight shaft tools such as Jamshitas and K-wires, regardless of the specific type, manufacturer, etc. And additional types of tools would be being VUZed and added later on.
I mean, the genius of your system is the software base. No cameras, no markers, no references, no registration, tool neutral, and it fits like a glove into your workflow. It's
Right.
This is terrific. Um, Radiation. What impact? What is the impact of using this system? Again, something surgeons worry about, right? Radiation. What is the impact of the system on radiation?
Right. So actually, I believe we did have a slide on that that we did not have the
Oh,
time to cover
okay. There we
before.
go.
Oh, here it
Yeah.
is. So we do have some potential facilitators for reduction in radiation when using the VUZE system. I should note that those have not been proven statistically yet on a large sample size, etc., and therefore are not included in our current indications. What we're seeing here in the video is a very neat feature, we believe, we have that is when rotating the C-arm, seeing simulated X-rays generated according to the current C-arm angles from the pre-op 3D data. So the surgeon can rotate the C-arm until a desired position is reached and only then acquired an actual X-ray. And additionally, as mentioned before, we do not need any lateral views. The AP views need not be Ferguson views. They can be any generally AP views. So we believe those features and more are potential facilitators for reduced radiation.
And again, this fits well into the ASC setting, outpatient setting, but also if you're a hospital and you have experience with some of the more
Correct.
traditional systems and your surgical volumes, which by the way are generally up in the United States this year, and you need it, you would like another system. This is David. This is complementary to some of the more legacy systems, is it not?
Right. Right. And also for some additional procedures, we had questions about SI fusion, etc. So the current indications are for stabilizations thoracolumbar. But cadaverically, yes, we've also performed successfully a number of SI fusions, pain therapies, open surgeries, etc. And per the question that was asked during the broadcast, yes, we are capable. For example, we do show during SI fusion the coronal view as well. So the potential for the system is also demonstrated cadaverically is, we believe, far beyond the current indications in terms of additional skeletal interventions in spine and beyond spine.
Now, generally speaking, how much is the system? Now, of course, we're asking for sites who are willing to take the system and be sort of reference sites. But
Right.
they may have a lower cost or different cost, I should say. But
Oh,
generally speaking, how much is the system? Right.
right. So for those initial sites that we mentioned before, we are not planning on having any costs associated with them. And down the road, really, all the possibilities are open.
Look, I see we already have one site just texted us and said, please consider us. So we are past our 1 hour. Let's see if there's any other questions here that we should tackle right away. I think, David, you were so good to answer a few of these already.
Well,
There
thank you.
was a question about endoscopy. Did you want to make a quick
Right,
comment
that's
there?
another potential indication down the road, because in endoscopy, you don't start with endoscopic vision right away. You first insert wires, dilators, etc.
Right.
So what is required in those phases is guidance to the desired entry point and the desired trajectory. And we believe that is certainly within the capabilities of our system. It's another indication that is planned for the future.
Okay. Well, let me close with a couple thoughts here. And again, this is going to be our production team is going to organize this for posting on our YouTube channel. We'll be promoting this for the next 60 days or so. So there's be plenty of opportunity to rewatch. But this is really the very first system I've ever seen that begins with a bunch of no's, no cameras, no markers, no references, no registration, and tool neutral. And this is the first time I've heard 5 no's in a row to be actually an extremely positive way of characterizing a system. And the main point here is this is a system designed by one of the smartest designers who's done this 2 times previously in
Well,
2 other medical sectors.
it's our team. Sorry for interrupting,
And the
but it's our
team,
team
excuse me, you're
that has
exactly right.
considerable experience in
Exactly.
those endeavors.
I have met your
Nothing is
team
one
and they,
person.
not at all. No, no. If you want to go fast, one person. If you want to go a long time, you need a team. So it's a smaller footprint, use a standard 2D C-arm. It's off-the-shelf PC. The team is looking for 2 reference sites. This is a system that has cut the cost, it's cut the complexity, it's cut the footprint, but there is no diminution of performance, and the image quality is really impressive. And as you heard with both doctors, the accuracy is second to none. So this is a really remarkable system. No wonder it won our Best Technology and Spine Award last year. I I want to thank you, David, again, and of course the entire
Thank you,
team
Robin.
that makes this possible. It's our pleasure and our honor to be able to feature really new systems like yours that are going to move medicine and spine surgery forward. And of course, our audience, thank you so much for participating. Um, look forward to seeing all of you again in other master classes. And we're going to do a live master class at the 2024 NAS program in Chicago. I hope to see everybody there.
Thank
David,
you very much for
thank
the
you.
opportunity.
And congratulations. Great, great, great job.